Hey guys, today we embark on a journey that stretches further back than your comfiest weighted blanket. A voyage into the very origins of how we communicate. Imagine, for a moment, standing on the precipice of time, the faint scent of wood smoke clinging to the crisp air, the stars overhead a million pinpricks in a velvet sky. You're not scrolling through TikTok for cat videos. You're not even thinking about cat videos, because the concept of a screen, let alone a cat meme, would probably make your early human brain simply short-circuit and explode. Yes, we're going back, way back, to a time when the most complex communication you could hope for was a grunted warning about a saber-toothed tiger. And let's be real, you probably wouldn't survive that encounter anyway. But amidst the mammoth hunts and the quest for fire, something truly magical began to stir. It wasn't the invention of the wheel, not yet. It was something far more subtle, far more profound. The first whispers of a visual language, a quiet revolution etched into the very fabric of the earth. You trudge through the shadows of ancient caves, your torch casting dancing figures on the rough stone walls. The air is cool, damp, carrying the faint, earthy scent of millennia. What you see aren't just pretty pictures. They're the genesis of a story, a silent conversation across time. You trace a finger over the outline of a mighty bison, its muscular form captured with an astonishing vitality. This isn't just an animal, it's a message. Perhaps it's a record of a successful hunt, a teaching tool for the young ones, showing them where the heart of the beast lies. Or maybe it's a prayer for future abundance, a way to connect with the spiritual world that felt so tangible then. This is where it all begins, my friends, in the dim, echoing chambers of prehistory, with what we now call pictographs. Think of it like this: if you wanted to tell someone, "I saw a big deer," you didn't have words. You didn't have letters, so what did you do? You drew a deer. Simple, direct, undeniably clear. If you wanted to add, "And I threw a spear at it," you drew a stick figure with a spear flying towards the deer. These weren't elaborate works of art in the modern sense. They were efficient visual shorthand. They bypassed the need for a shared spoken language, a universal translator etched in ochre and charcoal. You might see a handprint, ghostly and stark, a quiet declaration of presence. I was here. It's like the earliest form of leaving a Yelp review for a good hunting spot, only instead of 5 stars, it's a meticulously rendered auroch that says, "Dinner delicious. Would recommend." One of the most famous examples, the Lascaux caves in France, discovered by teenagers and a dog back in 1940. Imagine that for a summer vacation, are teeming with such visual narratives. You walk through these underground galleries, and you're not just looking at paintings. You're deciphering an ancient almanac, a hunting guide, perhaps even a social register. The sheer volume of detail, the depiction of movement, the use of perspective. It tells you that these were not random doodles. These were deliberate acts of communication, crafted by minds just as complex as yours, even if their lives were, shall we say, a bit more survival of the fittest than your morning commute. This wasn't true writing, in the sense of abstract symbols representing sounds or ideas, but it was the essential first step, the primal scream of communication beyond grunts and gestures. And here's a quirky little detail. Alongside the magnificent animals, you sometimes spot geometric patterns, dots, lines, zigzags. For a long time, these were dismissed as mere decorative elements, or perhaps abstract ramblings. But some contemporary researchers are starting to wonder if these seemingly random markings might be far more significant. Perhaps even early forms of notation, marking lunar cycles, or even primitive territorial claims. Imagine stumbling upon a series of dots next to a mammoth, and realizing it's not just, here's a mammoth, but here's a mammoth we tracked for 3 moons. It's like the original dot-to-dot puzzle, except the prize isn't a picture of a duck, it's survival. Historians still argue whether these ancient artists were primarily driven by spiritual ritual, a desire to magically influence hunts, or if the paintings served a more practical, didactic purpose, teaching the next generation about animal behavior and tracking. You can almost hear the hushed debates echoing through academic halls, thousands of years after the last cave painter laid down their pigments. Was it art for art's sake? Or was it survival for survival's sake, with art as the most effective medium? You find yourself pondering this as you imagine the flickering lamplight illuminating those masterpieces. Perhaps a small child's hand being guided by an elder, etching their mark into the shared history of their people. The beauty of the pictograph lies in its universality. You don't need to speak the language of the person who drew the image to understand its basic intent. A stick figure running away from a lion is universally understood as danger. This inherent clarity made them incredibly powerful tools in societies without a common written language. Imagine trade routes, hundreds of miles long, where different tribes spoke entirely different dialects. How do you convey that you have extra obsidian but need flint? You draw it. You sketch a sharp stone and then another, duller one, gesturing trade. It's the original international sign language, etched onto rocks, bones, and eventually, the very first rudimentary forms of clay tablets. But you quickly hit a ceiling with pure pictographs, don't you? How do you depict abstract concepts? How do you say hunger without drawing a stomach rumbling? Or love without resorting to a crude heart shape, which, by the way, comes much, much later, so don't get ahead of yourself. You see a drawing of a sun and you think sun. But does it mean day? Does it mean hot? Does it mean God of the sun? The ambiguity is both its strength and its ultimate weakness. It's like trying to have a deep philosophical conversation using only emojis. You can get across, I'm happy, with a smiley face, but try expressing the existential dread of postmodern consumerism, and you're just left with a blank stare, or maybe a confused-looking shrug emoji, which still doesn't quite cut it. So while these images were revolutionary, a giant leap from grunts and gestures, they had their limitations. They were essentially snapshots, moments frozen in time, but they lacked the fluidity to capture complex ideas, nuances of thought, or the passage of abstract time. You couldn't write a history book with just pictures of mammoths and hunters, unless it was a very, very short history book titled Mammoths, Hunters, the Story. It was a fantastic start, the foundational layer of our visual communication cake, but the next few layers would need a little more linguistic leavening. You're watching the very, very slow unfurling of human ingenuity, seeing how the brain, faced with the need to communicate more, to record more, began to stretch, to innovate, to move beyond the literal. The path to true writing, to the alphabet, to our beloved emojis, wasn't a straight line, but a winding river, and these early pictographs were the first trickle from the spring. They whispered tailies, yes, but soon, those whispers would need to become a roar. You've moved beyond the scratched cave walls, past the painted bison, and the stick figures that whispered tailies of the hunt. Now, feel the sun-baked earth beneath your feet, the dust of 1,000 forgotten generations tickling your nostrils, as you squint across the vast, fertile crescent of Mesopotamia. Here, in the cradle of civilization, something truly revolutionary is stirring, something that will systematize the whispers into shouts, the anecdotes into empires. Imagine, if you will, being a scribe in ancient Uruk, hunched over a damp clay tablet. No back support, No ergonomic keyboard. Just you, the Mesopotamian heat, and a piece of wet mud that feels surprisingly heavy. You probably wouldn't survive a week, let alone an entire career of chiseling wedge-shaped secrets into malleable earth. Your wrists would give out faster than a chariot wheel on a bumpy road, and your patience, gone, vanished into the desert winds before you even finished writing grain inventory. This wasn't just drawing pictures anymore, though it certainly started that way. Remember those early pictographs? A crude head for man, a wavy line for water. Well, picture that, but then imagine trying to write a complex legal code with a series of tiny, intricate drawings. It'd be like trying to compose a symphony using only emojis of varying shades of purple. Inefficient, slow, utterly maddening. So the Sumerians, these brilliant, practical people who invented everything from the wheel to, probably, the first ever bureaucratic headache, realized they needed an upgrade. Their solution? Abstraction. They took those pictures and simplified them, rotated them, and eventually transformed them into these standardized, geometric marks. It's like your modern keyboard evolving from actual little pictures of letters to the abstract, QWERTY arrangement. Suddenly, that crude head for man became a series of quick, precise wedge impressions. That wavy line for water, now just a few strategic jabs with a reed stylus. This transformation from picture to pattern is the true magic of cuneiform, literally wedge-shaped in Latin. You're not painting on a wall or scratching on bone. You're holding a stylus, typically a reed cut from the riverbanks, carefully sharpened to a triangular point. And your canvas, a plump, moist slab of clay. The trick was to press the corner of the stylus into the soft clay, creating a neat, crisp impression. Then, with a slight twist or drag, you'd form the distinctive wedge. Each sign could be made up of 1, 2, or many of these wedges, angled just so. It sounds simple, like poking Play-Doh, but achieving the uniform depth and precise angles needed for legibility was an art form in itself. One false press, one too deep jab, and you just ruined a few hours of painstaking work. And unlike your modern undo button, there was no Control plus Z here. Just a quick flattening of the clay and a fresh start. Imagine that stress. It was through this painstaking process, starting around 3200 BCE, that the Sumerians gave birth to what many historians consider the world's very first true writing system. Not just a collection of symbols, but a system capable of expressing complex ideas, nuances of grammar, and even abstract concepts. It's the granddaddy of nearly every alphabet you've ever encountered. A fundamental leap in human communication that allowed for the codification of laws, the recording of histories, and the drafting of epic poems like the Epic of Gilgamesh. Before this, knowledge largely lived in people's heads or was passed down orally, prone to the inevitable distortions of gossip and faulty memory. With cuneiform, suddenly, knowledge could endure, inscribed in clay for millennia. Speaking of enduring, did you know that many of our cuneiform tablets are actually student homework? Imagine the Mesopotamian equivalent of a school kid, painstakingly copying a list of fish names or a royal decree, only to make a mistake and get whacked with a stick by his man in charge of the stick. We've found countless tablets with corrections, practice drills, and even what appear to be ancient crib sheets. It gives you a surprisingly relatable peek into the rigorous, often brutal world of the ancient scribe school. Some tablets even contain complaints from students about their overbearing fathers or the dreadful school lunch. Turns out, some things truly never change. However, despite thousands of unearthed tablets and decades of dedicated research, Historians still argue whether the initial impetus for cuneiform was primarily for economic record-keeping, like tracking grain surpluses or livestock counts, or if it quickly developed in parallel for more administrative and literary purposes. Was it born out of a desperate need to count sheep, or a grand vision to record the deeds of kings? The truth, as always with ancient history, is probably a complex blend of both. But the debate keeps those academic fires burning, fueled by freshly deciphered fragments. This systematization meant that for the first time, complex societies could manage their affairs on an unprecedented scale. You could have a standardized tax system, a written legal code that applied across an entire empire like Hammurabi's famous laws, which dictated everything from property rights to penalties for incompetent builders. Another reason you probably wouldn't survive ancient Mesopotamia: one shoddy brick, and you might be facing a surprisingly painful legal precedent. You could send detailed military orders across vast distances, track trade routes, and even record astronomical observations with incredible precision. No more relying on a runner's memory or the vagaries of oral tradition. It was information management 1.0, and it was revolutionary. The soft thwack of the stylus into damp clay, the gentle rasp as a careful scribe smoothed a mistake, the warm, earthy smell of the freshly formed tablet as it began to dry in the fierce sun. These were the sounds and sensations of an empire being built, one wedge at a time. Picture vast libraries, not of scrolls, but of neatly stacked clay tablets, each a meticulously recorded fragment of ancient life. Every administrative decree, every legal contract, every spell and divination, every love poem, all etched into permanence. It was a language of geometry, a script that looked less like a picture and more like a carefully constructed code, designed for efficiency, clarity, and perhaps most importantly, durability. These tablets, baked hard by accident in temple fires or deliberately in kilns, have outlasted civilizations, carrying their secrets forward through millennia, waiting for us to patiently unearth them, one dusty, wedge-shaped whisper at a time. You feel the desert sun bake your skin, a dry, ancient heat that sears your throat with every breath. Dust devils dance in the distance, shimmering mirages tempting your parched eyes. Before you, colossal stone pylons soar into the impossibly blue sky, their surfaces etched with a dizzying tapestry of figures. Hawks, ankhs, swirling water, seated pharaohs, marching soldiers. It's all there, an entire universe of meaning carved into the very rock. You reach out, your fingers tracing the cool, smooth lines of a falcon-headed god, the craftsmanship so exquisite you almost expect the stone to pulse with life. This isn't just art. It's language, raw and untamed, whispering secrets from millennia past. And frankly, navigating this land without knowing how to read these signs, well, you probably won't survive this. Not with the scorching sun and the occasional vengeful deity. Remember those simple pictograms, the tales whispered on cave walls. And then those meticulous, abstract wedges of cuneiform that systematized thought. Now you're stepping into a world where art and communication didn't just coexist, they were utterly inseparable. Welcome to the intricate world of Egyptian hieroglyphics, the pharaoh's own picture writing. Imagine trying to explain your entire life story using only emojis. But these aren't your cute little yellow faces. These are regal, divine, and sometimes a little terrifying. Every bird, every basket, every coiled cobra has a purpose, a sound, or a concept attached to it. The beauty of hieroglyphics lies in their multi-layered complexity. They weren't just simple pictures representing the object they depicted, like our earliest cave drawings. Oh no, the ancient Egyptians were far too sophisticated for that. A hieroglyph could be a logogram, meaning it stood for the object itself. Think of a little sun disk, and it means sun. Simple enough, right? But then it could also be a phonogram, representing a sound, much like individual letters in our alphabet. So that same sun disk could represent the raw sound. Confused yet? Just wait. Then came the determinatives. These were unpronounced signs added to the end of a word to clarify its meaning. Imagine if, after you typed bank, you had to add a tiny picture of a river or a tiny picture of a piggy bank to show whether you meant a river bank or a financial institution. That's a determinative. So a hieroglyph depicting a walking leg might mean to walk or to run, logogram, or it might simply represent the B sound phonogram, and then a little determinative of a pair of legs running would tell you, ah, this word is about movement. It's like a secret decoder ring, but you have to figure out which setting to use for each symbol. It's truly a marvel of ancient cognitive load management, or perhaps a historical prank on future archaeologists. Let's make it look easy, but then, surprise, you see these symbols everywhere. They're not confined to dusty scrolls hidden in sarcophagi, though you'll find plenty there. No, hieroglyphs adorn the walls of grand temples, chronicling the glorious deeds of pharaohs, their battles, their offerings to the gods, and their occasional complaints about the quality of the Nile floods. They covered the inner walls of elaborate tombs, guiding the deceased through the treacherous journey to the afterlife, ensuring they knew the right spells and the proper gods to bribe. They were carved onto obelisks, towering stone needles piercing the sky, proclaiming the power and piety of their rulers for all eternity. Even humble pots and tools bore simpler inscriptions, perhaps noting ownership or a simple blessing. The sheer artistic effort involved is astounding. Imagine legions of scribes and artisans painstakingly carving or painting these intricate symbols, each one a miniature masterpiece. It wasn't just about conveying information. It was about beauty, about divine order, about perpetuating the cosmic balance. The lines are crisp. The colors, though faded by millennia of sun and sand, hint at their original vibrancy. You can almost hear the soft tap of chisels, the whispered chants of priests overseeing the sacred script. For centuries, millennia even, these enigmatic picture words guarded their secrets. After the decline of ancient Egyptian civilization, the knowledge of how to read hieroglyphics slowly faded, replaced by other scripts. It was as if a vast library of knowledge was suddenly locked, the key thrown away. The meanings became obscure, the connections between symbol and sound lost to time. For well over 1,000 years, these majestic inscriptions were admired for their artistry, but remained largely unintelligible. Scholars from later eras peered at them, baffled, making wild guesses, sometimes even dismissing them as purely decorative, mystical symbols without true linguistic content. They'd look at a bird and think, yep, that's a bird. Not, that bird means to fly, and also the sound ba, and sometimes it just tells you the previous word is about avian matters. You can almost hear the collective groans of Egyptologists across time. If only they'd left us a manual. The breakthrough, as you might recall from every documentary about ancient Egypt ever made, came with the discovery of the Rosetta Stone. This isn't just a mainstream historical fact. It's the ultimate linguistic cheat sheet. Found in 1799 by French soldiers during Napoleon's campaign in Egypt, it was a stela inscribed with a decree issued in 196 BCE on behalf of King Ptolemy V. The crucial detail? The same text was written in three scripts: hieroglyphic, demotic, a later Egyptian script, and ancient Greek. Since ancient Greek was still understood, scholars finally had a key. It was like finding a universal translator for an entire lost language. The work of decipherment, led most famously by Jean-François Champollion in the early 19th century, was monumental. He meticulously compared the names of Ptolemy and Cleopatra, which were enclosed in cartouches, those oval frames, to unlock the phonetic values of many hieroglyphs. It was a true aha moment that reverberated through the halls of academia. Now, for a quirky tidbit. Did you know that the direction in which you read hieroglyphics could change? Unlike our left-to-right or right-to-left scripts, hieroglyphs could be read from left to right, right to left, or even top to bottom. You figured out the direction by looking at the direction the animals and people were facing. They always faced the beginning of the text. So if all the little birds and people were looking left, you read from left to right. If they were looking right, you read from right to left. It's like a built-in GPS for reading, though probably more confusing if you weren't an ancient Egyptian. Imagine trying to read a modern book where some pages start from the left and others from the right, just depending on which way the illustrations are pointing. Madness, I tell you. Absolute literary madness. And here's something historians still argue whether it was a deliberate design choice or an evolutionary quirk. Why did the Egyptians maintain such a complex system of writing for so long, even when simpler, more phonetic scripts, like the ones we'll get to soon, were emerging elsewhere? Was it a sacred tradition, too intertwined with religion and art to be simplified? Was it a way for the priestly class to maintain their exclusive knowledge and power? Or was it simply a case of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, even if it required a lifetime of study to master? The debate continues, echoing through academic journals and hushed museum halls. For now, you just marvel at the intricate dance of image and sound, knowing that even in their earliest forms, human attempts at writing were never simple. They were, much like us, complex, beautiful, and sometimes utterly bewildering. You feel the salt spray on your face, taste it on your lips, as the wooden hull of your cargo ship creaks and groans beneath you. The sun, a molten disk, bakes the Mediterranean, turning the distant horizon into a shimmering mirage. Around you, men with sun-weathered faces shout orders in a language that's a cacophony of guttural sounds and sharp consonants. A language you're just beginning to grasp. This isn't the slow, meandering Nile, nor the dusty plains of Mesopotamia. This is the open sea, where fortunes are made and lost with every gust of wind. And frankly, you probably won't survive this trip if you can't keep track of the goods. You're a trader now, a transient, part of the bustling network that weaves its way across ancient waters, connecting distant lands with exotic goods. From the vibrant purple dyes of Tyre and Sidon, extracted from countless murex snails, a smell, by the way, you'll never quite get out of your tunic, to the shimmering bronze tools, the prized cedar wood, and the exquisite glass trinkets, you carry the wealth of the world. And with that wealth comes the crushing need for a writing system that can keep up. Imagine trying to jot down a quick inventory of 50 amphorae of olive oil using intricate hieroglyphs, each a tiny masterpiece of a bird or a basket. Or perhaps you're trying to note a debt in cuneiform, painstakingly pressing wedges into a damp clay tablet while your customer taps his foot impatiently, eager to haggle over the price of a bolt of linen. It's slow. It's cumbersome. It's about as efficient as trying to send a text message using a pigeon. This is where the Phoenicians, these master mariners and shrewd merchants, step onto the stage of history, not with a bang, but with a series of very practical grunts and hisses. They didn't invent writing, not by a long shot. You remember those early whispers of pictographs, the wedge secrets of Mesopotamia, the pharaoh's pictures. But the Phoenicians, with their relentless focus on commerce and communication, saw a problem and in typical entrepreneurial fashion, found an elegant solution. Instead of trying to draw every object or even every syllable, they realized something truly revolutionary. All speech, no matter how complex, is built from a relatively small number of distinct sounds. Think about it. When you speak, you're not making 1,000 different noises for 1,000 different words. You're combining a handful of fundamental sounds, ba, da, ga, sss, mmm, in different sequences. It's like discovering that all those complicated recipes only require a few core ingredients. You just need to know how to combine flour, sugar, eggs, and butter in different ways to get a cake or a cookie. This was the stroke of genius that gave birth to the first true alphabet, around 1050 BCE. Their system consisted of just 22 characters, each representing a consonant sound. No vowels yet, those would come later, a thoughtful upgrade from the Greeks, who found it terribly inconvenient to try to decipher TRD as trade or tread or tried. The Phoenicians just expected you to know the context. It was a bit like expecting someone to read a license plate and know if it says BLU or BALU. Mostly it worked, especially for business transactions. So when you needed to write silver, you didn't draw a tiny, shining ingot. You simply strung together the symbols for sell VR quick, efficient, and crucially easy to learn. Unlike the scribal schools of Egypt or Mesopotamia, which required years of dedicated study to master hundreds, sometimes thousands of complex symbols, a Phoenician sailor could pick up the basics in a few weeks. Imagine the competitive advantage. Your rivals are still etching their purchase orders onto heavy clay tablets with a stylus, while you're scribbling yours onto a piece of papyrus with a reed pen, sealing the deal and sailing off with a smug grin. It's the ancient equivalent of having a smartphone while everyone else is still using carrier pigeons. This simplicity was its superpower. As Phoenician ships crisscrossed the Mediterranean, laden with goods, they also carried this revolutionary new writing system. Their trading posts, dotting the coasts from modern-day Syria all the way to Spain, became hubs not just for commerce, but for cultural exchange. The alphabet spread like wildfire, adopted and adapted by countless cultures. It was a true viral phenomenon, centuries before cat videos were even a twinkle in the internet's eye. Historians still argue whether the Phoenician alphabet was a purely independent invention, or if it drew significant inspiration from earlier Proto-Sinaitic scripts, themselves thought to be simplified offshoots of Egyptian hieroglyphs. Some scholars suggest it was a gradual evolution, a tinkering and streamlining process over centuries, rather than a single eureka moment. But regardless of its exact genesis, its impact is undeniable. It was the crucial missing link, the bridge between the cumbersome picture-based writing systems and the efficient, sound-based alphabets that dominate the world today. It laid the foundation for virtually every alphabet you see around you, from the Latin script you're reading right now, to Cyrillic, Arabic, and Hebrew. The seeds of modern literacy were sown on the decks of those ancient Phoenician ships, bobbing on the azure waves. They were, in essence, the original data couriers, except their data was sound, and their packets were papyrus. You stand on the bustling docks of an ancient Aegean port, the sun warm on your face, the scent of salt and unfamiliar spices thick in the air. Around you, the clatter of amphory echoes, punctuated by the rhythmic creak of rope against wood. And then the voices. You strain to understand the calls of the Phoenician traders, their language a staccato burst of sounds, heavy with consonants. It's almost like listening to a modern-day teenager text. BRB or lol, you get the drift, but the nuances, the feeling, it's all implied, isn't it? Every word feels like a series of percussive clicks and guttural stops. You catch BTL and wonder, are they talking about a bottle? A battle, a beetle? Without the soft, flowing sounds that shape our words, every utterance feels like a riddle, a linguistic obstacle course. You'd probably not survive long in an argument, let alone a diplomatic negotiation, if this was your only mode of communication. Misinterpretations would be rampant, leading to anything from a slightly off-kilter dinner order to an accidental declaration of war. Imagine trying to explain complex philosophy or compose epic poetry when every noun sounds like every other noun, just consonantier. This is the world the Greeks encountered as they began to truly engage with their maritime neighbors. Those shrewd Phoenician sailors you remember from earlier, who spread their practical, consonantal alphabet across the Mediterranean like spilled olive oil. The Greeks, with their love for poetry, their orators, their philosophers who spoke in grand, rolling pronouncements, found themselves in a curious bind. They saw the genius of the Phoenician system, a simple set of symbols representing sounds, far more efficient than the thousands of hieroglyphs or the intricate wedge marks of cuneiform we explored before. It was a revolutionary leap from pictographs. Remember those whispery tailies of early humans sketching bison on cave walls. And it was a huge step up from Mesopotamia's abstract forms or Egypt's artistic script. But it was also incomplete. For the Greek ear, so accustomed to the melodic rise and fall of their own tongue, the Phoenician script was like a song played only on drums, all rhythm and no tune. Their language, rich with inflection and subtle vocal shifts, simply couldn't squeeze itself comfortably into a purely consonantal straitjacket. So, what's a nation of lyrical thinkers to do? They did what any resourceful culture does. They adapted. And in this adaptation, they performed one of the most brilliant linguistic innovations in history. You see, the Phoenician alphabet had some sounds that simply didn't exist in Greek, or weren't used in the same way. Think of certain guttural sounds or aspirated consonants. Rather than discarding these unused symbols, the Greeks, in an act of pure linguistic genius, repurposed them. They looked at a symbol like aleph, the Phoenician sign for a glottal stop, that little catch in your throat like between uh-oh and thought. We don't really have a standalone sound for that, but it looks a bit like an A when we twist it. Let's make it alpha. And thus, the very first vowel was born, transforming a silent, throat-catching non-sound into the glorious, open a that begins so many of our words. They did this repeatedly. He, another Phoenician consonant, became the Greek epsilon, a short E sound. Yod, which represented a Y or I sound in Phoenician, was transformed into Iota, our I. And the Phoenician ayin, a guttural sound deep in the throat, found new life as omicron, the short O sound. Finally, wa, a semi-vowel in Phoenician, was split, giving rise to both the consonant digamma, which later faded from use in most dialects, and crucially, upsilon, our U sound. Suddenly, the silent orchestra of consonants gained a choir of vowels, allowing words to sing, to carry emotion, to differentiate meaning with a clarity previously unimaginable. Imagine the relief. No more guessing if KT meant cat, kit, cut, or some obscure ancient Greek plumbing part. Now you could clearly articulate cat and sleep soundly knowing you weren't accidentally buying a kitchen utensil instead of a feline friend. This wasn't just a linguistic tweak. It was a revolution in how language could be written, and by extension, how complex thought could be preserved. Before this, the ambiguity of a purely consonantal script meant that context was king. You pretty much had to know what was being said, or hear it spoken, to fully grasp the meaning. It was a bit like trying to read a shorthand note without the accompanying longhand. But with vowels, the script became much more self-sufficient. You could pick up a text, even when you hadn't heard before, and decipher it with a much higher degree of accuracy. This was crucial for the flourishing of Greek literature, philosophy, and drama. Think about the soaring eloquence of Homer, the intricate arguments of Plato, or the devastating tragedies of Sophocles. Could these masterpieces have truly reached their full potential? Could they have been preserved and disseminated without the nuanced articulation that vowels provided? It's doubtful. They would have been mere whispers, easily misinterpreted, rather than thunderous declarations. Historians still argue whether this innovation was a sudden stroke of genius by a single brilliant mind, or a more gradual, organic evolution over generations as Greeks interacted with the Phoenician script and slowly molded it to fit their phonetic needs. Was it a moment of eureka, or more of a gentle, persistent shaping, like water wearing away stone? The prevailing theory leans towards a period of intense cultural exchange, perhaps over several centuries, where the practical benefits of a truly phonetic alphabet became increasingly apparent to Greek speakers. The sheer audacity of taking a system designed for one language and repurposing its fundamental building blocks for another is something that still fascinates scholars today. It wasn't just adoption. It was a profound, creative transformation. And what did this mean for you, an average Greek citizen? It meant literacy became far more accessible. While writing was still a specialized skill, the alphabet, now complete with vowels, was significantly easier to learn and master than previous systems. No longer did you need years of rigorous training to become a scribe, memorizing thousands of complex characters, or deciphering the cryptic shorthand of consonant-only texts. Now, a relatively small set of around 24 symbols, each representing a single, distinct sound, vowels and consonants alike, allowed you to encode and decode nearly any word in your language. It democratized knowledge in a way that ancient Egyptians or Mesopotamians could only dream of. Imagine sitting down to read a scroll, not as a laborious chore of interpretation, but as a fluid, almost effortless act of understanding. The words sang off the page, just as they did in speech. This innovation wasn't an overnight sensation, mind you. The early Greek alphabets varied quite a bit from region to region, with different cities having slightly different forms of letters and even different vowel assignments. It took time for a more standardized version to emerge, ultimately settling into the classical Greek alphabet that we recognize today. But the core idea, the concept of distinct symbols for vowel sounds, was there from the start of the Greek adoption of the Phoenician script. It was the missing link, the secret ingredient that allowed an efficient, sound-based writing system to truly unlock the full expressive power of spoken language. From here, the alphabet wasn't just a tool for record-keeping or simple messages. It became a vessel for philosophy, for epic poetry, for the very fabric of human thought. The abstract became concrete. The fleeting whisper of a spoken word became an enduring mark on papyrus, all thanks to a few clever Greeks who heard the silent song in their language and decided it was time to make it sing aloud. And as you drift further into this story, remember this moment, this vital breath, the first true linguistic exhalation on the path from ancient whispers to modern emojis. You stand on a sun-baked Roman road, the dust motes dancing in the morning light as legions march by, their hobnailed boots kicking up little clouds. The air is thick with the smell of sweat, leather, and ambition. You're not just observing. You're an unwitting participant in one of history's greatest administrative feats. The standardization and spread of a writing system that would literally carve its way across an empire. Gone are the days of playful Greek vowels singing. This is the no-nonsense, pragmatic Roman approach, where every chisel mark serves a purpose, every inscription a declaration of power. If you were actually here, traveling with these legions, you'd probably be less impressed by the literacy rates and more concerned with avoiding dysentery or a rogue javelin. You see, while their letters conquered lands, Roman hygiene wasn't quite so victorious. The Romans, ever the practical engineers of their time, looked at the Greek alphabet, admired its elegant simplicity, and then, in true Roman fashion, said, "Excellent. Now how do we make this more efficient for invoicing and monumental decrees?" They borrowed heavily, certainly, but they also adapted it to their Latin language, discarding some Greek letters they didn't need, like zeta or psi, and introducing new ones to represent uniquely Latin sounds, such as G, which evolved from C and Y and Z, reintroduced later for Greek loanwords. It was less an artistic revolution and more a highly successful business merger, streamlining an already potent communication tool for maximum imperial impact. You can almost hear the toga-clad consultants droning on about synergy and scalable communication solutions. Observe the majestic Roman capitals carved into stone monuments. They are the epitome of clarity and authority, designed to be read from a distance, conveying a clear, unambiguous message. This isn't some messy, quickly scribbled note. This is the permanence of empire etched into the very landscape. And here's a quirky tidbit you might not have considered. Those little feet on the bottom of many capital letters called serifs, they weren't just for aesthetics. When Roman stonemasons carved letters, they would first paint the letters onto the stone. As they chiseled, it was easier to make a clean, straight cut by finishing the stroke with a slight horizontal flourish at the end, preventing the chisel from slipping or the stone from chipping unevenly. What began as a practical solution to prevent crumbling edges effectively became a fundamental design element, defining the look of Roman type for millennia. It's like discovering that the stylish button on your shirt was originally there just to stop it from flapping open. This isn't just about carving letters. It's about embedding the very structure of Roman thought into the conquered territories. As legions marched, roads were built, and cities sprung up. So too did the Roman alphabet. It spread not just through the might of the sword, but through the mundane necessity of administration, law, and commerce. Imagine a newly annexed province. Suddenly, land deeds need to be written, tax rolls compiled, and military orders disseminated. The clear, standardized Roman script became the lingua franca of governance. It was a powerful tool for assimilation, gently nudging diverse populations towards a shared written culture. You might find yourself learning Latin simply to avoid being misunderstood by the local tax collector. And trust me, Roman tax collectors were probably even less understanding than the ones you deal with today. One mainstream historical fact that underscores this is the sheer uniformity achieved. From Hadrian's Wall in Britannia to the scorching sands of Egypt, the Roman capital letters maintained an astonishing consistency in their form and proportion. The famous inscription on Trajan's column in Rome, a stunning example of monumental epigraphy, showcases letters so perfectly formed that they served as a template for type designers centuries later. This wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate and disciplined standard. The Roman approach was less about individual artistic expression and more about collective legibility, reflecting their societal values of order, discipline, and efficiency. They wouldn't tolerate wonky A's or lazy B's now. While we marvel at this standardization, historians still argue whether the Roman alphabet truly conquered and entirely replaced existing local scripts, or if it evolved in a more symbiotic relationship, selectively incorporating elements from indigenous writing systems in certain regions before asserting its dominance. Was it an immediate cultural bulldozer, or a more gradual erosion and assimilation? The answer likely varies depending on the specific conquered territory and the resilience of its native traditions. But one thing is certain: the Roman alphabet, for all its borrowed elements, became an unyielding symbol of their empire, flowing through its veins like molten lead, binding disparate peoples under a common written word. It was the original empire-as-a-service model, and their most enduring export wasn't wine or olive oil, but the very letters you're probably reading right now. 7. Monks' manuscripts glow. See medieval scribes meticulously copy and illuminate texts, preserving knowledge visually. You step out of the bustling Roman forum, where letters carved in stone once proclaimed the might of emperors and laws, and find yourself in a quieter, more shadowed era. The very landscape of knowledge has shifted, much like the tectonic plates of power and civilization. The grand, public proclamations of Roman letters have receded, replaced by a softer, more intimate glow, a glow emanating from within the thick stone walls of remote monasteries. Imagine, if you will, the biting chill that permeates these ancient abbeys, particularly in the scriptorium, the dedicated room where the sacred, painstaking work of copying texts unfolds. You huddle in your rough woolen tunic, the dampness seeping into your bones, and watch as a single shaft of weak, unfiltered light struggles to pierce the gloom, illuminating a solitary figure bent over a vast vellum page. This is a monk, a brother of the order, and his entire world for this moment is the meticulous dance of his quill across the prepared animal skin. The air is thick with the faint, earthy scent of parchment-treated animal hides, usually calf, sheep, or goat, a smell that whispers of countless hours of scraping, stretching, and preparing. It's a far cry from your sleek, mass-produced paper. Here, every sheet is a testament to labor, often requiring an entire herd's worth of animals just for a single large volume. And yes, if you were a scribe, you probably won't survive this particular ergonomic nightmare. Imagine the chronic back pain, the eye strain from squinting in poor light, the calloused fingers, the sheer mind-numbing repetition. Your modern wrist braces and ergonomic chairs would be useless here. You'd be lucky to even have a stool that didn't give you splinters. Look closer at the scribe's hand. It moves with a hypnotic rhythm, not rushed, not hesitant, but with a practiced, almost meditative grace. He's not composing, he's replicating. His task, a sacred duty, is to preserve the words of Scripture, the wisdom of the ancients, and the chronicles of his time. This, dear listener, is the mainstream historical fact of the hour. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, it was primarily within these monastic scriptoria that the flickering flame of literacy and classical knowledge was kept alive, while much of Europe plunged into what historians affectionately, or perhaps dismissively term the Dark Ages. These silent, devoted monks were the unsung heroes of intellectual continuity, meticulously transcribing everything from Virgil and Cicero to biblical texts and early scientific treatises. Without them, countless irreplaceable works would have simply vanished into the dustbin of history, leaving us with, well, probably just a lot more really vague emoji options. See the tools of his trade. A sharpened quill, perhaps from a goose, its tip dipped into an inkwell filled with a rich, deep black made from gallnuts and iron salts. The ink flows smoothly, leaving precise, elegant strokes. But then, as he finishes a section, he reaches for another pot, one containing not just black, but vibrant reds, shimmering blues, and even glowing golds. This is where the illumination comes in, the art of adorning manuscripts with intricate designs, decorative borders, and miniature paintings. These aren't just pretty pictures. They're often narratives in themselves, visual aids for a largely illiterate populace, or mnemonic devices for the monastic reader. You can almost feel the weight of expectation on his shoulders, the pressure to produce not just legible text, but a work of art, a devotional object. Historians still argue whether the primary purpose of this lavish illumination was purely aesthetic beauty, a practical guide for understanding the text, or a spiritual act of glorifying God through artistry. Perhaps it was all three, a trifecta of medieval dedication. And sometimes, just sometimes, a glimmer of the scribe's own personality peeks through the solemnity. You lean closer, discerning the faint, almost imperceptible marginalia, little notes scribbled in the margins, sometimes hidden, sometimes not. This is our quirky tidbit for tonight. These scribes, despite their vows of humility and silence, were human. You might find a frustrated note lamenting the cold. "Oh, my hand is freezing," or a complaint about the poor quality of the parchment. "This vellum is hairy," or even, charmingly, a sign of extreme fatigue. "Thanks be to God, I am finished with this book." It's like finding a grumpy tweet from a copy editor, centuries before Twitter existed. It reminds you that even back then, people had bad days at work and weren't shy about expressing it, even if it was in the tiniest, most illicit of ways. Makes you wonder if they had a medieval version of reply all disasters. The sheer scale of this endeavor is staggering. A single Bible could take years to copy, requiring hundreds of animal skins and countless hours of meticulous work. Every letter, every word, every punctuation mark, which were often very different from what you're used to, by the way, sometimes just little dots, sometimes a long slanting line to indicate a pause, was rendered by hand. There were no printing presses, no spell check, no undo button. One mistake, and you'd have to scrape the ink off the precious parchment with a sharp knife, a process known as erasure by scraping, which often left telltale marks, like a medieval whiteout job. Imagine trying to explain that to your boss. "Yeah, I just scraped off a paragraph with a blade, but it's fine." As you observe the monk, you notice the Roman letters you've become accustomed to from the last section. The sturdy, familiar capitals are subtly shifting. They're becoming more decorative, more embellished. Serifs are growing more pronounced. Curves are softening, and new forms are emerging, like the uncial and half-uncial scripts, rounded and flowing, perfect for the smooth, continuous flow of the quill. These are the ancestors of the lowercase, letters you read every day, slowly evolving from the monumental capitals of the Roman Empire into something more fluid and practical for continuous writing. It's a subtle transformation, almost imperceptible from day to day, but over centuries, it reshapes the very look of written language. It's like watching a majestic, powerful lion slowly evolve into a fluffy, slightly lazy housecat, but still retaining its regal bearing. The scribes weren't just copyists, they were guardians of legacy. They ensured that when the world was ready, the knowledge of the past would still be accessible, waiting to be rediscovered, analyzed, and eventually printed. Their slow, deliberate work laid the foundation for the explosion of literacy and information that would come centuries later. Without their glowing manuscripts, painstakingly crafted in the quiet chill of the scriptorium, the very thread connecting us to our ancient past might have snapped. The alphabet, once a series of abstract sounds, was now being reborn, not just as a tool for communication, but as an art form, a glowing testament to human perseverance in the face of oblivion. You remember those dedicated monks, don't you? Hunched over their vellum and parchment, their quills scratching softly in the hushed scriptoria, each page a tiny miracle of patient artistry. They were the original data preservers, meticulously copying ancient wisdom, one glorious, illuminated letter at a time. A noble effort, truly, but one that ensured books remained a luxury, a whispered secret for the privileged few. If you wanted a copy of, say, the latest theological treatise, you'd be on a waiting list longer than a medieval winter. And the price? Well, let's just say your entire village's annual wool output might not cover it. You'd probably go your whole life, maybe even 2 or 3 lifetimes, without ever seeing a book. And let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive the medieval period anyway, so it's a moot point. Now, picture this. It's the mid-15th century, in Mainz, Germany. The air isn't filled with the gentle rustle of turning pages or the faint scent of beeswax candles. No, here, there's a metallic tang, the earthy aroma of linseed oil, and the persistent thud-thud-thud of something far more industrial. You step into a workshop, perhaps a bit dusty, with wooden frames and metal contraptions dominating the space. This isn't a monk's quiet cell. This is where the quiet revolution begins. This is Johannes Gutenberg's domain. He's a goldsmith, a craftsman, a tinkerer with an obsession. He's looked at those laborious manuscripts, he's seen the demand for books, and he's thought, there has to be a faster way. And faster he found. What he conjured from his mind, and his workshop wasn't just an improvement. It was a seismic shift, a re-engineering of how information would flow, eventually reaching even those curious enough to wonder about Phoenician sounds or Roman letters. Gutenberg's genius lay in movable type. Imagine each letter of the alphabet, not drawn or carved as part of a whole block, but cast individually in metal. Tiny, perfect, interchangeable blocks of lead, antimony, and tin. You could arrange them in a frame, spelling out words, sentences, entire pages. This was the fundamental shift. Instead of carving an entire page's worth of text into a single, fragile wooden block, which became useless after printing that one page, Gutenberg's system allowed you to reuse the letters over and over again. It's like the difference between hand-knitting a sweater for every single person who wants one, and designing a knitting machine that can churn them out by the dozen. Suddenly, the bottleneck of manual transcription, the very thing that made knowledge so exclusive, shattered. You see the typesetter at work. Their fingers, nimble from years of practice, pick out individual metal letters from compartmentalized trays, a sort of alphabet soup. But instead of delicious broth, it's filled with the very building blocks of knowledge. They arrange them, letter by letter, word by word, into a composing stick, and then transfer rows of these tiny metal soldiers into a larger form or chase, locking them tightly so they don't wiggle out of formation. This assembled page of type is then inked. Not by dipping a feather, mind you, but with leather-covered balls or rollers, uniformly applying a thick, black, oil-based ink that adheres beautifully to the raised surfaces of the type. It smells, well, like the future if the future smelled of ink and metallurgy. Then comes the press itself. It's a wooden behemoth derived from the design of wine or olive presses. A sheet of paper, typically handmade and carefully prepared, is laid over the inked type. A platen, a flat, heavy plate, descends with immense pressure, pressing the paper firmly against the inked type. There's a satisfying thump, a creak of wood, and then slowly the platen lifts. And there it is, a perfect, crisp impression of the text, replicated in moments. No smudges, no stray ink blots from a weary scribe's hand, just clean, uniform letters marching across the page. The impact was immediate and profound. For the first time, books could be produced in quantities previously unimaginable. A single printing of the Bible, the legendary Gutenberg Bible, a mainstream historical fact, if there ever was one, involved producing around 180 copies in just a few years. Before this, such an undertaking would have taken hundreds of monks' decades, if not centuries, to complete. This wasn't just about speed, it was about standardization. Because the same metal types were used for every copy, the text was remarkably consistent. No more scribal errors creeping in, no more accidental omissions, no more variations in spelling or punctuation from one monastery to the next. For the first time, a reader in Germany could be sure they were reading the exact same words as a reader in France. This standardization wasn't just convenient, it was foundational. It slowly but surely began to fix spellings, to solidify grammar, and to shape the very idea of national languages. Suddenly, regional dialects, which had freely roamed across manuscripts like unruly goats, were corralled into more uniform pens. And what about those quirky details? Well, Gutenberg wasn't exactly rolling in cash despite his groundbreaking invention. He borrowed heavily for his project and ended up losing his equipment and likely his fortune to his business partner and creditor, Johann Fust. It seems even world-changing innovators had to deal with the medieval equivalent of venture capitalists breathing down their necks. You'd think the guy who basically invented mass media would die a millionaire, wouldn't you? No. Historians still argue whether Gutenberg's true genius lay in the movable type itself, which had precedence in Asia, or in the entire integrated system he developed. The specialized ink, the robust press design, the meticulous casting of uniform type, and the efficient workflow. Was it a singular stroke of brilliance, or a master synthesis of existing technologies? Regardless, the effect was undeniable. The price of books plummeted, not overnight, but steadily. Literacy rates, once stagnant, began to creep upwards. The common person, who once heard stories and information only by word of mouth, could now access a written world. Ideas revolutionary, heretical, scientific, artistic, could spread like wildfire, unfettered by the slow drip of manuscript production. You're talking about the intellectual equivalent of going from carrier pigeon to broadband internet. This was the moment text production became a powerhouse, capable of disseminating information globally, setting the stage for every textual revolution that would follow, right up to the tiny glowing screen you probably just glanced at. You find yourself transported, not to the whirring, clanking world of Gutenberg's press, which we just left, but to a quieter, more intimate space. Imagine dust motes dancing in sunbeams that slant through a tall, narrow window, illuminating a single, hunched figure. The air smells of parchment, beeswax, and perhaps a faint, lingering whiff of the ink, maybe even the faint, metallic tang of the quill's nib. You hear the rhythmic scratch-scratch of the pen on vellum, a sound that, in its day, was the very heartbeat of knowledge. Before the uniform, predictable blocks of type could conquer the page. Every single letter was a tiny, individual performance. It was a world where a text wasn't just read. It was felt, seen, and uniquely interpreted by the hand that shaped it. This is where the personal touch truly came alive. Think of it. Every swoop, every flourish, every meticulously formed serif wasn't churned out by a machine. It was born from a human hand, guided by a mind, influenced by mood, by skill, by even the occasional cramp from holding a quill just a little too long. You're looking at what we'd now call the original handwritten font, only infinitely more complex and variable. Each scribe had their own distinct style, their quirks, their signature flourishes. It was like the ultimate secret handshake, only instead of a handshake, it was your entire manuscript. And if your handwriting was atrocious, well, you probably wouldn't survive this particular career path. Nobody wants to decipher a doctor's note from the 14th century, let alone an entire Bible. This wasn't just about legibility. It was about beauty, about artistry. The art of calligraphy, from the elegant, flowing uncials of early Christian texts to the more compact, angular Carolingian minuscule, a mainstream historical fact, by the way, designed for clarity and a bit of space saving, was a serious craft. Monks, scribes, and copyists, tucked away in scriptoria that were often colder than your average walk-in freezer, dedicated their lives to mastering these intricate forms. Their tools were simple. A sharpened quill, usually from a goose or swan, because who wants to write with a chicken feather? It's just undignified, a pot of ink made from soot and gum arabic, and sheets of carefully prepared parchment or vellum. It was less like writing and more like painting with words, each page a canvas. Imagine the pressure, knowing every slip of the quill meant potential hours of scraping away mistakes with a tiny knife, hoping not to tear the precious animal skin. It makes your most frustrating autocorrect moment seem like a vacation. But beyond the formal, often sacred texts, there was a whole universe of personal scripts. Think about the hurried notes exchanged between scholars, the shopping lists of medieval merchants, or the love letters penned by nervous suitors. These informal scripts, often called cursive or documentary hands, were far less constrained by the strict rules of calligraphic perfection. They were faster, more immediate, a direct channel from thought to page. And here's a quirky or fringe tidbit. Sometimes scribes would include tiny, often humorous, drawings or comments in the margins of their formal texts called marginalia. Imagine a tiny medieval snail with a human head, or a doodle of a grumpy monk. It's like the original meme, only a lot less shareable and significantly more prone to being erased by a zealous editor. This personal touch in handwriting wasn't just about aesthetics, it was about authenticity. Before the printing press, your signature, the unique way you formed your letters, was your identity, your seal of approval, your guarantee. It was an unbreakable bond between the writer and the written word. It's why forgery was such a heinous crime. It wasn't just stealing property, it was stealing identity, soul, and trust, all wrapped up in a few squiggles on a page. And honestly, if you couldn't tell the difference between a real signature and a fake, you were probably in for a bad time. You didn't have biometric scanners back then, just a really good eye for calligraphy or a very bad day. Historians still argue whether the move from these highly individualized scripts to the more uniform, block-like typefaces of the printing press was a net gain for literacy and information dissemination, or if something intangible was lost in the process. Was the gain in accessibility worth the loss of the scribe's unique voice, their painstaking craft, the very soul poured onto the page? Some argue that the standardization was crucial for widespread understanding, allowing for easier, faster reading. Others lament the decline of personal expression in the written word, seeing it as the first step towards a more impersonal, homogenized communication. It's a debate that touches on the very essence of human connection through text. So, as the world braced for the typographic revolution, remember that beneath the grand pronouncements of the printed page lay centuries of individual hands, each leaving their indelible personal mark. Each stroke of the quill, each dip into the inkwell, was a unique act of creation, a whisper from one human to another, long before anyone dreamed of a press spitting out thousands of identical sheets. These were the artists of the word, the unsung heroes whose personal touches shaped the very foundation of written communication, long before uniformity became the reigning king. They understood that sometimes the message isn't just in the words, but in the unique way they dance across the page, a personal rhythm played just for you. Now let the hum of the printing press fade, and the scratch of the scribe's quill fall silent, because suddenly the air itself crackles with an entirely new kind of magic. You stand on the precipice of a revolution, not of ink and paper, but of pure, unadulterated electricity. Imagine, if you will, the mid-19th century. The world is getting smaller, not geographically, but in terms of how quickly news can travel. You've got trains thundering across continents, but even they are too slow for the burgeoning needs of commerce, war, and let's be honest, juicy gossip. People need to know things now. And waiting for a letter, even one carried by the fastest pony express, feels positively medieval. You tap your foot impatiently, a very modern impatience in a surprisingly unmodern world. This is where the telegraph steps onto the stage, a clunky, beautiful beast of wires and clicks. Suddenly, information can zip across vast distances at the speed of light, or at least the speed of electrons. But here's the rub, and it's a big, fat, expensive rub. Every single letter, every space, every punctuation mark you transmit costs money. We're talking about a time when sending a message from New York to San Francisco could set you back what today would be hundreds, if not thousands, of dollars, depending on the length. So if you were planning to send your rambling, stream of consciousness thoughts to Aunt Mildred about the exquisite detail of your morning crumpet, well, you probably wouldn't survive this financially. The telegraph operators, bless their patient souls, would also probably perish from sheer boredom deciphering your culinary odyssey. This wasn't just about being thrifty, it was about efficiency. The technology itself, in its nascent stages, was prone to errors, and simpler, shorter messages were less likely to be garbled in transmission. Think of it like trying to shout a secret across a hurricane. The fewer words you use, the better chance they have of being understood. So a curious dance began between the sender and the receiver, a silent negotiation over every single character. You learned to condense, to truncate, to strip away every superfluous syllable until your message was a skeletal whisper of its former self. Arrive Tuesday wasn't just short, it was necessary. Forget, I shall endeavor to arrive on the second day of the week, weather permitting, and trust you are well. That verbose monstrosity would bankrupt you faster than a bad investment in a flying machine. This economic and technological pressure cooker led to a fascinating evolution in language itself. Telegraphers, the unsung heroes of early electronic communication, became masters of the shorthand. They developed their own slang, their own abbreviations, their own way of conveying maximum meaning with minimum effort. You'd see messages filled with codes like GA for go ahead, or 73 for best regards, long before anyone ever conceived of texting LOL or BRB. It was a secret language born of necessity, whispered over copper wires. Interestingly, some early telegraph operators even used specific numbers or punctuation marks as emotional cues, a sort of proto-emoticon before the world even knew what an E was, let alone an emoji. Imagine the thrill of receiving a message that was just a series of dots and dashes, only to realize, through some shared telegraphic lexicon, that it conveyed profound sadness or bubbling joy. It was less about what was said, and more about what was not said, conveyed through the economical dance of the key. This enforced brevity wasn't just a fleeting trend, it forged a precedent. For the first time on a massive scale, humans were truly challenged to communicate effectively within strict character limits. It was a cognitive shift, forcing a new kind of mental discipline. You had to distill your thoughts to their absolute essence, like a chef reducing a sauce, letting all the unnecessary water evaporate until only the concentrated flavor remained. Historians still argue whether the high cost per word primarily drove the conciseness, or if the technological limitations of sending complex signals played a larger role in shaping the telegraphic language. Was it the purse that dictated the words, or the very mechanism of transmission? It's a chicken and egg question, really, but the outcome was undeniable. Communication became lean, mean, and incredibly efficient. This wasn't just about sending a message. It was about reimagining language for a speed-obsessed world, laying the invisible groundwork for every bite-sized communication we take for granted today. Remember those Phoenicians, ruthlessly efficient with their consonant-only alphabet? The telegraph was their spiritual successor, stripping away the superfluous to get to the core of the message, leaving only the essential. And it did so with a rhythmic click-clack that echoed the very heartbeat of a new, faster era. You're floating now, not in murky prehistoric swamps, nor within the echoing chambers of a medieval scriptorium, but in a realm built of pure thought, pure electricity. Imagine yourself shrinking, not to the size of a microscopic creature, but to the scale of a single electrical pulse, racing along a wire. This is the digital realm, a place where all your carefully crafted letters, those elegant Roman capitals and those fleeting telegraphic dots and dashes, need to transform into something entirely new. Numbers, you see the light flicker, bright then dim. A cascade of on and off states, ones and zeros, the fundamental language of everything digital. It's a bit like trying to explain the taste of purple to someone who's only ever seen black and white, or how much information is truly encoded into the seemingly simple act of sending a text. And honestly, if you truly understood how much digital information you consume daily, and how fragile its underlying structure is, you probably wouldn't survive this conversation. Just saying. Because here's the thing about computers. They don't care about the graceful curve of a handwritten S or the imposing serifs of a printed T. They only understand electrical signals, a binary dance of presence or absence. So how do you take the entire sweep of human language, from the simplest, to the most complex symbol, and teach it to a machine that speaks only in flickers? You build a blueprint. You create a universal translator, a sort of digital Rosetta Stone for every character you'd ever want to type. And that, my friend, is where the American Standard Code for Information Interchange, or ASCII for short, struts onto the stage like the undeniable star it was destined to be. Picture a busy committee room in the early 1960s, smoky and filled with the earnest chatter of engineers and linguists. They're debating, not the merits of different fonts, but which number should represent the letter A, or the question mark, or even just a simple space. This wasn't a casual chat, it was a foundational moment. They needed a standardized way for different machines, built by different companies, to understand each other when sending text. Before ASCII, it was digital pandemonium. One computer might think 1,000,001 meant A, while another, slightly more rebellious machine might interpret it as Q, or even a cryptic error message. It was like trying to have a coherent conversation when everyone was speaking their own secret code. Remember those early telegraph operators trying to make sense of garbled messages? Now, multiply that by 1,000,000 machines. The goal of ASCII was to eliminate that confusion, to provide a fixed, agreed-upon numerical value for 128 common characters. This 128-character limit is a mainstream historical fact that shaped early digital communications significantly. ASCII was a 7-bit code, meaning each character was assigned a unique number from 0 to 127. So, A became 65, B became 66, a space was 32, and so on. It was elegant in its simplicity, a clear, concise dictionary for the burgeoning digital world. This standardization was akin to the Romans spreading their alphabet across an empire, ensuring everyone spoke the same written language, but now for machines. Suddenly, a text file created on one computer could be sent to another, across different networks, and the recipient machine would display the exact same words, letter for letter. It was a revolution in compatibility, a quiet triumph for interoperability. Now, for a quirky tidbit. Did you know ASCII included a bunch of non-printable control characters right from the start? These weren't letters or numbers you'd see on your screen, but commands. There was the bell character, number 7, which literally made a terminal beep. A quaint relic of a time when computers tried to get your attention with a little chime. Then there was carriage return, 13, and line feed, 10, which told the printer or screen to move to the beginning of the next line, echoing back to the physical movement of a typewriter carriage. Imagine a computer politely telling itself, "Okay, done with this line, time to hit enter." It was all very mechanical in its digital design. These seemingly minor details were crucial, ensuring that not only the characters themselves, but also their arrangement and formatting could be consistently communicated. But like any grand linguistic endeavor, ASCII wasn't without its growing pains. Historians still argue whether the initial decision to make ASCII a 7-bit code, heavily favoring English characters and symbols, inadvertently set back global digital communication for decades, or if it was a necessary, pragmatic stepping stone for early adoption. It served English-speaking countries wonderfully, providing a digital backbone for their communications. But if your language relied on characters outside of the Latin alphabet, say, umlauts, cedillas, or entire non-Roman script systems like Cyrillic, Greek, or certainly Asian languages, you were, shall we say, out of luck. ASCII just didn't have room for them. It was like building a house with only enough doors for a family of 4, then inviting the entire neighborhood to live there. The digital world was expanding faster than anticipated, and soon, 128 characters felt laughably restrictive, a digital straitjacket for a globalizing planet. The seeds of a much bigger character problem were already being sown, even as ASCII basked in its initial, well-deserved glory. The digital blueprint was laid, but it was clear it would need several additions, extensions, and entire new wings to house the full linguistic diversity of humanity. You are now in this moment witnessing a strange new dawn, a subtle shimmer on the digital horizon. It is a time when the cold, hard logic of ASCII, which we just explored, begins to thaw, a tiny crack appearing in its perfectly ordered grid. You are there, perched precariously on the edge of the screen, watching lines of monochrome text scroll by, endlessly, monotonously. Remember that grand, structured blueprint of ASCII, how it gave every letter, every number, every symbol its own precise digital address. It was efficient, yes, groundbreaking even, but let's be honest, a tad soulless. Like a perfectly built robot that can assemble a car but can't quite manage a convincing high five. The problem, you see, was that humans, being the delightfully messy creatures we are, crave nuance. We crave inflection, irony, that little roll of the eyes that says, "Oh, you." When you type "I'm fine" into a bare-bones digital message, does it convey genuine well-being or the quiet despair of someone who's definitely not fine but lacks the energy to elaborate? ASCII just gave you the letters. It gave you the punctuation. It gave you the means to type a full stop, but not the feeling behind it. So, here you are, a digital pioneer, navigating early online forums, bulletin board systems, and nascent email exchanges. Conversations are stilted, misunderstandings are rife. Irony lands with the thud of a dropped anvil. A sarcastic comment about, say, the amazing flavor of burnt toast might just be taken as a genuine culinary recommendation. You can almost feel the collective sigh of 1 million early internet users, desperate for a way to inject a little human flavor back into their stark digital prose. And then, almost accidentally, it happens. A spark, a tiny flicker of ingenuity born from necessity and a healthy dose of digital playfulness. The year is 1982. The place, Carnegie Mellon University, a bustling hub of early computing. Imagine the scene. A busy computer science department, a digital forum where faculty and students exchange messages. There's a problem with jokes, you see. They're landing flat. People are misinterpreting attempts at humor as serious pronouncements, leading to confusion, even minor digital kerfuffles. It's almost as if everyone decided to take everything literally all at once. One bright September day, a computer scientist named Scott Fahlman proposes a simple, elegant solution. He types out a message on the forum, a seemingly innocuous suggestion that would ripple out to fundamentally reshape how we communicate online. He proposes using a combination of punctuation marks to denote a joke. His exact words, which you can almost hear echoing through the dusty server rooms of the past, were, "I propose that the following character sequence for joke markers. Read it sideways. Actually, it is probably more economical to mark things that are not jokes, given current trends. For this use," and just like that, the emoticon was born. Not a grand, sweeping invention, but a quiet, almost apologetic suggestion. A pragmatic fix for a very specific problem. You tilt your head, just like those early users did, and suddenly there it is. A smiling face made from a colon, a hyphen, and a closing parenthesis. Or, for the truly unfortunate news, a frowning face. It's so disarmingly simple, so intuitively brilliant, you wonder how it took so long for someone to stumble upon it. It's like discovering you can use a spoon to eat soup after centuries of trying to scoop it up with a fork. Honestly, you probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes in that era without some kind of emotional shortcut, let alone navigating the treacherous waters of text-based sarcasm. The idea spreads like wildfire, not through official decrees or marketing campaigns, but organically, virally, among these early digital communities. People adopt it, adapt it, play with it. Soon, you see variations emerge. The surprised face, the winking face, the indifferent face. It's a silent rebellion against the tyranny of plain text, a way to reclaim some of the expressiveness that spoken language takes for granted. Think about it. A single glance, a slight raising of an eyebrow, conveys so much in a face-to-face conversation. Online, with just those flat ASCII characters, you had nothing. Now you had a secret code, a visual shorthand that instantly communicated intent, mood, and subtle shades of emotion. It was like finally being able to add a soundtrack to a silent film. Historians still argue whether Scott Fahlman's suggestion was truly the first recorded instance of a text-based smiley, or if similar rudimentary forms existed in isolated pockets before then. The truth is, the human need to express emotion visually predates even the earliest pictographs. But Fahlman's contribution was the moment it truly hit the mainstream, solidifying a standard that would be universally understood across disparate computer networks. And here's a quirky tidbit for you. Before Fahlman's suggestion, some users on different systems were already trying their own methods. There were early attempts to use asterisks for emphasis, or to type out "ha ha" to denote laughter. Some even tried to use brackets to denote emotional states, like happy or sad. It was a wild west of emotional expression, a desperate scrabble for clarity in the digital void, but none quite struck the universal chord that the humble achieved. It was the perfect blend of brevity and visual recognition. The beauty of these early emoticons was their sheer economy. 3 characters, sometimes just 2, could completely alter the perceived meaning of a sentence. They were the punctuation marks for your feelings, a tiny emoji precursor that slotted neatly into the character sets already available. They didn't require fancy graphics or special software. They were pure ASCII, born from the very limitations of the digital landscape. You could type them on any keyboard, send them through any early network. They were the universal language of digital mood, whispered through modems and displayed on glowing green screens. They allowed for a kind of digital intimacy, a playful human touch in what was otherwise a very formal and functional medium. You've just watched, perhaps with a slight yawn, how those simple colons and parentheses, the humble punctuation marks, suddenly gained a cheeky personality, winking and smiling at you from the monochrome screen. But humanity, bless its ever-evolving heart, rarely stops at mere symbols when there's a picture to be drawn. Remember those ancient pictographs, those first whispers of meaning etched onto cave walls. Your brain, it turns out, is still hardwired for visuals. And as the digital world began to bloom, tiny, pixelated blossoms started to appear, pushing beyond the humble text-based emoticon. Imagine, if you will, the flickering green glow of an early computer monitor. Not the sleek, vibrant displays you scroll through before drifting off to sleep now. Oh no, this was the wild west of computing. You're dialed in, the screech and warble of the modem a symphony you'd probably find terrifying today. A sound that, if you truly had to live through it for every connection, you probably won't survive this level of digital glacial pace. But within these rudimentary environments, in the nascent online chat rooms and bulletin board systems, or BBS, a new kind of visual language was bubbling up. Mainstream historical fact alert. The advent of graphic user interfaces, GUIs, even simple ones, on personal computers in the 1980s and early 90s, slowly began to pave the way for something more than just character-based text. While command lines reigned supreme for a long time, the desire to add more flair to online interactions was palpable. Think of it like this. Your ASCII smileys were brilliant, concise, a little bit minimalist chic. But what if you could have a real little face? Not a photograph, mind you, but a small, blocky graphic that held more emotional weight than a sideways colon. This is where you see the true precursors to modern emojis emerge. These weren't universal standards, not yet. Instead, they were often small, custom graphical files used within specific chat programs or on individual BBSs. You'd log into a particular BBS, maybe one dedicated to discussions about obscure sci-fi novels or early computer games, and suddenly, alongside the text, you'd see tiny pixelated faces. A happy face, a sad face, maybe even a surprised face with little lines for eyebrows. They were crude, often just 8x8 or 16x16 pixels, but they were pictures. They broke the monotony of text, adding a flash of human expression that was otherwise lost in the cold, hard characters. Imagine the painstaking effort, too. Quirky tidbit. Many of these early graphical icons were often hand-drawn, pixel by painstaking pixel, by the system administrators or enthusiastic users themselves. There were no sophisticated drawing programs readily available to the average user, so someone would literally zoom in, pixel by pixel, to craft a tiny digital representation of a thumbs up or a little heart. It was a labor of love, a testament to the human need to communicate more richly than just words allow. This was true digital craftsmanship, an art form in itself, where every single square of light or darkness mattered. It's like modern pixel art, but with even more stringent limitations and a dial-up connection as your muse. These early digital icons weren't uniform. If you jumped from one BBS to another, the little happy face you saw on the Byte Oasis might look completely different from the one on the cybernetic cauldron. There was no central authority, no Unicode consortium dictating the precise shade of yellow or the curve of a smile. It was a charming chaos, a testament to the grassroots nature of the early internet. Every community, almost every chat program, had its own idiosyncratic set of visual shorthand. This period was a fascinating bridge, a transition from the purely conceptual text-based emoticon, which relied on your brain to do the heavy lifting of visual interpretation, to the introduction of actual graphical elements. It showed a burgeoning understanding that emotional nuance was vital in digital conversation. Text, as powerful as it is, can be misinterpreted. Sarcasm, joy, genuine concern, these are tricky to convey without tone of voice or facial expressions. These tiny digital faces, even with their rudimentary appearance, began to fill that void. The underlying technology was also crucial here. As graphical displays became more common and memory became cheaper, even marginally, it became feasible to embed these small images directly into the flow of conversation. You'd type your message, and then perhaps insert a command or a specific character sequence that the chat software would interpret and replace with the corresponding graphic. It was a small leap, but a significant one. It was the moment where the alphabet, having reigned supreme for millennia, started to realize it needed some visual companions in the digital realm. There's a quiet academic murmuring, a scholarly debate that echoes through the digital archives, about whether these early graphical icons were a direct evolution from the ASCII emoticons. A simple case of, we can finally draw it, so we will, or if they represented a separate, distinct branch in the communication tree. driven more by the advancements in graphical display technology and the inherent human desire for visual shorthand? Was it an inevitable march from to a little yellow circle with eyes, or was it a parallel innovation waiting for the hardware to catch up? It's a bit like asking if a bicycle evolved from a unicycle or if both were independently invented because, well, legs and wheels. What you were witnessing in those flickering pixels was the very first flutter of wings for what would become the emoji. They weren't called emojis then, not by a long shot. They were smileys, graphical emoticons, faces, or simply icons. But the seed was planted. The idea that a single, small picture could convey a world of meaning, bypass language barriers, and add emotional depth to sterile text was firmly taking root. You were, perhaps unknowingly, part of a global experiment in visual communication. A grand lineage stretching from the first cave drawings to these humble 8-bit smudges. And the story, my friend, is just getting started. You are walking down a bustling street, perhaps in Tokyo, the neon glow of countless screens illuminating the perpetual twilight of the digital age. Your own device hums softly in your palm, a constant companion, a portal to 1,000,000 conversations, 1,000 expressions. You see fingers dancing across glass, thumbing out messages that blend words with tiny, vibrant pictures. These aren't just decorative flourishes. They are, in many ways, the modern hieroglyphs, a return to the pictorial after millennia spent refining the abstract lines of the alphabet. And if you're honest, navigating the sheer volume of digital information without these little visual shorthand tools, you probably won't survive this modern communication landscape. Remember those early digital icons we peeked at in the last section, those simple graphical faces that dotted the nascent online chat rooms? They were a step, a flicker of an idea, but they weren't quite there yet. They were isolated islands, not a cohesive language. To truly ignite the emoji craze, to unleash a global phenomenon that would eventually embed itself into the very fabric of our digital dialogue, we needed something more structured, something universal, something Japanese. It's the late 1990s, and Japan is already far ahead in the mobile phone revolution. While the West is still grappling with brick-sized Nokias, the Japanese are embracing sleek, keitai mobile phones as personal extensions. Communication is fast, furious, and often done on the go, with text messaging, what they called mail, already deeply ingrained. But there's a problem. These early screens are small, character limits are tight, and conveying nuance, emotion, or even complex information in plain text alone can be a tedious, often misunderstood exercise. Imagine trying to explain your precise level of annoyance at a delayed train using only 20 characters and no facial expressions. It's a recipe for societal breakdown, frankly. This is where Shijitaka Kurita enters the scene, a visionary working for NTT Docomo, Japan's largest mobile carrier. His team is developing iMode, an early mobile internet platform. Kurita recognized the limitations of text-only communication and saw an opportunity. What if they could add tiny, simple images to messages? Not just any images, but a standardized set that could be easily typed and universally understood across the iMode network. He wasn't thinking of complex illustrations. He was thinking of efficiency, of emotional shorthand. His inspiration? Everyday life. Manga, which, let's be real, is basically sequential art that taught a generation how to read feelings from exaggerated facial expressions. Weather forecasts, those little suns and clouds and umbrellas. The ubiquitous symbols you see everywhere, from street signs to restroom doors. He literally looked around, absorbed the visual language of his environment, and started sketching. He didn't have a massive budget, nor sophisticated design software. We're talking about drawing these little icons on a 12x12 pixel grid, practically creating art with individual digital dots. It's like trying to paint the Mona Lisa with only 144 squares of Lego. The results, as you can imagine, were gloriously simple, almost comically so by today's standards. The first set, launched in 1999, consisted of 176 distinct characters. They weren't called emojis yet. The term emoji itself is a Japanese portmanteau of picture, and moji, character. So literally, picture characters. And they included everything from weather icons to emotions, your basic smiling face, crying face, angry face, along with hearts, zodiac signs, and various common objects like a mobile phone, a car, and even a pile of, well, you know. The impact was almost immediate. Users absolutely embraced them. Finally, you could convey that you were happy, not just by typing HAPPY, but with a cheerful yellow circle. You could say it's raining with a cloud and raindrops, saving precious characters and adding clarity. It was revolutionary because it was intuitive, a natural extension of human communication. Now, here's a quirky tidbit. Kurita initially faced some internal skepticism. Some colleagues thought these picture characters were childish, a frivolous addition that detracted from the seriousness of business communication. Imagine that. The very tools that now facilitate countless business dealings, from confirming meetings with a simple checkmark to expressing appreciation with a clap, were once dismissed as digital doodling. It just goes to show, sometimes the most profound innovations come from the most unexpected and seemingly trivial places. However, historians still argue whether these 1999 NTT Docomo emojis were truly the first digital pictorial characters in a standardized set, or if earlier, less widespread systems, like those used on pagers or specific computer platforms, hold that title. It's a bit like debating who invented the sandwich. Was it the Earl, or some nameless medieval peasant who just stuck meat between two slices of bread out of sheer hunger? What's undeniable is that Kurita's set was the first to achieve widespread, popular adoption within a massive commercial service, setting the template for what would become a global standard. They were proprietary, of course, meaning a Docomo emoji wouldn't show up on a rival Japanese carrier's phone, which led to a frustrating, pre-standardization era of blank squares and confused messages. But the genie was out of the bottle. The demand was clear. People wanted to express themselves with pictures again. The alphabet was still king, yes, but its rule was about to be challenged by a tiny, expressive, pixelated army from the East. You tap out a quick message, a casual heart emoji trailing your words, sending it off into the digital ether. On your screen, it's a vibrant, ruby-red symbol, pulsing with unspoken affection. But then you imagine it landing on your friend's device, an older model perhaps, or one running a different operating system, and suddenly that beautiful, heartfelt symbol transmutes. It becomes a stark, empty box, or a question mark, or even worse, just nothing, an invisible void where your digital affection should have blossomed. It's like trying to send a love letter written in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. Remember those intricate pharaohs' pictures from way back in Section 3? To someone who only understands Roman letters, the conquerors from Section 6. The meaning evaporates, replaced by a profound digital silence. Because for years, that's exactly what digital communication felt like. a chaotic babel of incompatible symbols. You see, when computers first started talking to each other, they needed a common language for characters. That's where ASCII came in, our lean, efficient digital blueprint from Section 11. It was brilliant for English, covering the alphabet, numbers, and basic punctuation. But the world, as you've probably noticed, isn't just English, and it certainly isn't just text anymore. Remember those early emoticons, born from a clever arrangement of keyboard punctuation marks in Section 12. They were a workaround, a charming little hack. And then, remember how Japan totally ignited the emoji craze in Section 14, creating those first true pictorial characters. Well, therein lay a truly enormous problem. Each Japanese mobile carrier, like NTT Docomo, O, and SoftBank, had its own set of emojis. So a heart on one phone might look wildly different on another if it showed up at all. It was like everyone was sketching their own pictographs, way back to Section 1, but with no agreed-upon dictionary. Imagine the digital heartbreak, or the sheer frustration of trying to order a pizza when your pizza slice emoji turns into a blob of cheese emoji on the other end. You probably wouldn't survive that culinary confusion, let alone a global pandemic. The digital world was expanding, exploding with new languages, new symbols, new ways of expressing ourselves beyond the simple confines of the Latin alphabet. We weren't just typing out memos. We were sharing complex ideas, cultural nuances, and eventually tiny, expressive faces. The need for a universal translator, a digital Rosetta Stone for all of human script, became not just apparent but utterly critical. And so into this cacophony stepped Unicode. Unicode isn't a font. It's not an image file. It's far more fundamental than that. Think of it as a meticulously organized, constantly expanding library for every single character known to humanity, and then some. Its core mission is deceptively simple: to assign a unique, unambiguous number to every character, no matter what language, what script, or what platform you're using. This unique number is called a code point. So the letter A always has the same code point, whether you see it in Times New Roman, Arial, or some whimsical fantasy font. The smiling face with open mouth and cold sweat emoji. You know the one. That slightly anxious grin has its own specific, unchanging code point. This is its permanent address in the digital universe. This commitment to assigning a unique numerical identity to every character is the mainstream historical fact that underpins our entire global digital communication landscape. Without it, your phone would be a babel of broken boxes. The sheer scope of Unicode is breathtaking. It doesn't just cover the Roman alphabet or the Greek vowels, remember Section 5, or the abstract cuneiform, Section 2's wedges, or even the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. No, Unicode embraces almost every writing system in the world, past and present. Arabic, Cyrillic, Hebrew, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Devanagari, Tibetan, Ethiopic, Cherokee, even ancient scripts like Linear B. It's a truly monumental undertaking, stewarded by the Unicode Consortium, a non-profit organization that includes representatives from major tech companies, software developers, and linguists. They meet regularly, poring over proposals, debating the nuances of obscure scripts, and deciding which new characters, including, eventually, our beloved emojis, get a coveted spot in the universal digital lexicon. Initially, emojis were not part of Unicode. They were, as we discussed, proprietary creations of Japanese mobile carriers. But as their popularity grew, especially outside Japan, the pressure mounted to bring them into the global fold. People wanted to send those little expressive pictures, and be sure they would be seen correctly, universally. So, starting in 2010, the Unicode Consortium began the painstaking process of incorporating emojis. This wasn't a simple drag and drop. Each emoji had to be proposed, reviewed, and assigned its own unique code point. Then, vendors like Apple, Google, Microsoft, Samsung would take that code point and create their own visual representation of it. This is a quirky tidbit. While the underlying Unicode number is the same, the design of the emoji can vary dramatically from device to device. That's why your clapping hands emoji might look slightly different from your friends', even though you're both sending the exact same Unicode character. It's the digital equivalent of everyone agreeing on the word tree, but then drawing their own unique version of a tree. It's a fascinating dance between standardization and artistic interpretation. The work of Unicode is never truly finished. New scripts are discovered or revived, new symbols are needed, and new emojis are proposed. Hello, melting face, and troll. Historians still argue whether the process of standardizing global scripts, while undeniably beneficial for digital communication, might subtly influence or even flatten linguistic diversity over time. It's a weighty thought, isn't it? The very act of categorizing and numbering can shape the way we perceive and use language. But for the vast majority of us, the immediate benefit is undeniable. It means you can send that perfectly chosen, face with tears of joy emoji. It's still the most popular, did you know? From your cutting-edge smartphone to your aunt's decade-old flip phone. If she ever upgraded past the telegraph's brevity demands from Section 10, and know with absolute certainty that she'll see a face with tears of joy, not a cryptic blank box or a mysterious geometric shape. So the next time you effortlessly pepper your texts with smiling faces, waving hands, or even the humble eggplant, which, let's be honest, rarely represents its literal vegetable self anymore, take a quiet moment to appreciate the invisible, monumental work of Unicode. It's the silent guardian, the unsung hero, ensuring that our digital whispers and shouts, from the most profound philosophical musings to the most trivial cat memes, can transcend the boundaries of language, platform, and even time. It's the reason our modern digital world doesn't constantly dissolve into the chaotic, fragmented communication styles of the earliest pictographs, or the diverse handwriting styles of medieval monks. Remember them meticulously copying texts in Section 7. It ensures that a symbol created in Tokyo can be understood in Timbuktu, allowing our tiny, expressive pictures to truly speak a universal language. You feel the cool, smooth glass of the device nestled in your palm, its illuminated screen a miniature cosmos of light. Your thumb glides effortlessly, a ballet of taps and swipes, and then you see them. Tiny, vibrant ideograms bursting onto the digital canvas. A smiling face, a thumbs up, a dancing girl in a red dress, a perfectly ripe avocado. They are everywhere now, these little bursts of color and emotion, an almost subconscious language you speak without thinking. You probably won't survive this, by the way, this relentless onslaught of digital shorthand. It's too ingrained, too intuitive to escape. You're trapped in a cascade of pixelated sentiment, a silent scream of happy tears or a dramatic shrug conveyed by a single yellow circle. Remember how we drifted through the silent, profound world of Unicode, the great universal translator that gave all these tiny symbols a consistent digital home. Unicode was the patient architect, laying the foundation, meticulously cataloging every character from every language, ancient and modern, and then generously adding space for these nascent pictorial expressions. It was a massive undertaking, a truly noble effort to ensure that a character sent from Tokyo looked the same in Timbuktu. But a magnificent blueprint, no matter how perfect, doesn't build a house by itself. It needed a catalyst, a popularizer, a device that would not just support these symbols, but thrust them into the collective consciousness of billions, making them as indispensable as the alphabet itself. And that catalyst, my friend, arrived in a sleek rectangular form, adorned with a half-eaten fruit logo. You see, while emojis had been bubbling away in Japan for years, a quirky, colorful byproduct of early mobile phone culture, they remained largely a niche curiosity to the rest of the world. It was like knowing about a secret club for incredibly cool people, but not having the password. The Japanese mobile carriers, bless their innovative hearts, had their own sets, their own proprietary systems, a chaotic bazaar of visual communication that largely stayed within the archipelago. Then came Apple, a company known for taking existing technologies and with a touch of design wizardry and marketing genius, making them ubiquitous. In 2007, the very first iPhone landed, a revolution in your pocket, redefining what a mobile phone could be. It was sleek, intuitive, and crucially, it paved the way for a touch-screen interface that made visual input a natural extension of typing. Initially, emojis weren't even on the global iPhone. If you were outside Japan, you had to jump through hoops, download third-party apps, or even change your phone's region settings to unlock the elusive Japanese emoji keyboard. It was like a digital treasure hunt, requiring a certain level of tech savviness or sheer determination to access these delightful little pictures. People discovered clever workarounds, sharing tips in online forums, a clandestine community of emoji enthusiasts trying to bring a little more visual flair to their messages. It felt like finding a secret menu at your favorite restaurant, only instead of fries, you got a tiny eggplant. But then, Apple saw the light. Or rather, they saw the burgeoning demand. It became clear that these charming little characters weren't just a fleeting trend for Japanese teenagers. They were a powerful, universal form of expression. So, with iOS 5, released in October 2011, Apple integrated the emoji keyboard directly into the standard operating system for iPhones worldwide. One simple toggle in your keyboard settings, and suddenly a small, smiling globe icon appeared, waiting to transport you to a vibrant universe of digital imagery. This was the mainstream historical fact that cemented emoji's place in your daily life. No more region changes, no more obscure apps. It was just there, baked in, accessible with a tap. This simple act of integration was nothing short of revolutionary. It democratized emoji use, bringing the colorful world of pictorial communication to the fingertips of hundreds of millions, then billions, of users globally. Suddenly, your grandma could send you a winking face, your boss could send a celebratory champagne bottle, and your crush could send a suggestive peach. Though historians still argue whether the initial intention of the peach emoji was truly culinary, or, as some speculate, merely a botanical representation with an unfortunate, though highly amusing, subsequent interpretation. It allowed for a richness of expression that plain text simply couldn't convey. You could add nuance, sarcasm, affection, or outright bewilderment to your messages without typing a single extra word. It was the digital equivalent of a knowing glance or a raised eyebrow, conveyed instantly across continents. The accessibility of emojis on the iPhone changed the very fabric of digital conversation. Before, you might have laboriously typed LOL to express amusement. Now, a simple face with tears of joy conveyed a mirth so profound, so deeply felt, that tears actually streamed from its tiny, yellow eyes. Or perhaps you wanted to convey surprise. Instead of wow, you just sent a wide-eyed face with open mouth. These weren't just shortcuts. They were emotional amplifiers, adding layers of meaning that a simple text string could never replicate. It was like suddenly being given a palette of colors after only ever drawing with a gray pencil. Your digital canvases exploded with life. The widespread adoption through the iPhone also accelerated the expansion of the emoji lexicon. As more and more people used them, the demand for more diverse and inclusive emojis grew. You wanted different skin tones, more professions, more animals, more flags, more food. The Unicode Consortium, remember our meticulous librarians of symbols. They became busier than ever, constantly reviewing proposals, adding new characters, trying to keep pace with the ever-evolving demands of global communication. It was a fascinating feedback loop. Apple made emojis accessible, leading to massive user adoption, which in turn fueled the demand for more emojis, pushing the boundaries of what these tiny images could represent. Think back to the earliest pictographs, those crude cave drawings of stick figures and animals, whispers of stories from millennia past. They were attempts to communicate visually, to convey complex ideas without the intricacies of a phonetic alphabet. Then came the rigid lines of cuneiform, the majestic hieroglyphs, the efficient Phoenician alphabet, and the singing Greek vowels, all building towards a system of written language that prioritized abstract sound over direct imagery. And then, with the advent of the digital age, and especially with the iPhone, we swung back, embracing the pictorial once more. We didn't abandon the alphabet. Rather, we augmented it, creating a hybrid form of communication where words and images dance together on your screen. It's almost as if humanity, after thousands of years of refining abstract text, decided, you know what? Sometimes a tiny picture of a taco just hits different. The iPhone, by making these little pictures so incredibly easy to access, normalized their use, transforming them from a quirky digital novelty into an integral part of how you express yourself in the 21st century. It seamlessly integrated the visual shorthand into your everyday conversations, making it feel less like a separate language and more like an extension of your very thoughts. You no longer had to switch modes of thinking. The images flowed as freely as the words. And here you are, unconsciously reaching for that little globe icon, searching for the perfect emoji to encapsulate your feelings. The sheer ubiquity, the effortless integration, is a testament to the iPhone's profound impact. It didn't invent emojis, no. That credit goes back to Japan's pioneering spirit. It didn't standardize them. That was Unicode's monumental task. But what the iPhone did, brilliantly and effectively, was to open the floodgates, turning a niche digital curiosity into a global phenomenon. A colorful, expressive language that transcends borders and sometimes, frankly, makes absolutely no sense to anyone over the age of 30. Yet you use it anyway, because it feels right, it feels immediate, it feels you. The journey from hieroglyphs to these tiny digital icons is a winding one, full of surprising turns and unexpected detours. And with the iPhone in your hand, you're not just holding a phone. You're holding a tiny, powerful window into the future of human expression. You're not just sending a picture. You're participating in the ongoing construction of a global visual dialect. And this dialect, well, it's a living, breathing thing, growing so fast you almost need a dedicated librarian just to keep track of its ever-expanding volumes. Think about the humble bagel emoji, or even the relatively mundane brick. Each one, a tiny ambassador for a specific concept, a visual shortcut that transcends linguistic barriers. You can send a picture of a pizza to someone on the other side of the world, and they instantly get it, no translation needed. That's the magic, isn't it? The true power of these little squares and circles. Consider the emoji categories that have blossomed over the years. We started with faces, gestures, and a few basic objects. Now, you have entire sections dedicated to transport, from rickshaws to rockets, entire digital gardens bursting with every flora imaginable, and weather patterns so detailed you can practically feel the digital drizzle. You can even find specific instruments, like the banjo or the accordion, which begs the question: how many banjo-playing, accordion-wielding enthusiasts are truly out there demanding their digital representation? Apparently enough to warrant their inclusion. The push for hyper-specific emojis illustrates a beautiful, if sometimes bewildering, desire for precision in our pictorial conversations. It's like demanding a specific shade of blue when painting a masterpiece. Every detail matters to someone, somewhere. This relentless expansion isn't merely about adding quantity. It's about adding layers of nuance and reflecting the evolving tapestry of human interaction. Remember that feeling of being misunderstood in a text, where tone of voice is utterly lost. Emojis ride in like tiny, colorful cavalry, saving the day by injecting emotion, sarcasm, or genuine affection where words alone might falter. They've become integral to our digital etiquette, a silent agreement that without a face with tears of joy or a folded hands, your message might just fall flat. You're navigating a social landscape where the absence of an emoji can be as significant as its presence. For instance, sending a message without a single punctuation mark or emoji can sometimes feel aggressive. You're practically yelling in digital silence. The process of adding a new emoji is surprisingly democratic, yet also intensely bureaucratic. Anyone, yes you, can submit a proposal to the Unicode Consortium, detailing the need for a new symbol, providing sample images, and arguing for its frequency of use and potential for ambiguity. Imagine the passionate arguments, the detailed historical research presented for, say, a butter emoji versus a margarine emoji. It's a painstaking, often slow, journey from concept to digital reality. A quirky tidbit is that some emojis get stuck in limbo for years, debated and refined, while others seem to fast-track through the system, often driven by pop culture phenomena or sudden global events. The sheer dedication of these emoji advocates, poring over the minutiae of pixelated peaches, is a testament to how deeply ingrained these tiny images have become. Historians still argue whether the acceleration of new emoji releases is genuinely user-driven, a grassroots movement from billions of texters, or if tech companies strategically push for new additions to maintain user engagement and product relevance, a subtle gamification of communication. Regardless of the driving force, you are witnessing, in real time, the creation of a universal language that continues to grow and adapt, reflecting every facet of our incredibly diverse and constantly changing world. You're not just observing, you're a participant in this grand, vibrant visual conversation that continues to unfold, one tap, one scroll, one tiny icon at a time. Now, as you settle deeper into the cushions of your mind, a new linguistic landscape unfurls before you, one where the whispers of ancient pictographs, the abstract angles of cuneiform, and the regal hieroglyphs have culminated not in the stark lines of a printer, but in a riot of tiny, expressive faces and objects. You are no longer just reading words. You are navigating an intricate ballet of pixels, each one loaded with unspoken intention, subtle irony, or a sledgehammer of emotional truth. Welcome to the era where emojis aren't just decorative add-ons, but the very sinews of modern communication, crafting their own rules, their own lexicon, their own silent, yet deafening grammar. You see a text pop up on your screen. It's just 3 emojis, a sparkling star, a grimacing face, and a fire emoji. What does it mean? That's brilliant but terrifying and also incredibly hot. Or perhaps, my performance review was surprisingly good, but I'm going to have to work really hard, and I'm passionate about it. The truth is, without context, you're often adrift in an ocean of possible meanings. And honestly, the sheer volume of unspoken rules means you probably won't survive a single text message exchange without at least one social faux pas. You might think you're just sending a friendly little smiling face, when in reality, you've inadvertently declared your undying love, or worse, your profound boredom. Consider the simple thumbs-up emoji. In many online spaces, it's a standard affirmation, a quick understood, or a hearty yes. Yet place it after a particularly long-winded explanation and it transforms. It's no longer enthusiastic agreement, but a polite, slightly weary, "I've seen this, and I'm not engaging further." It's the digital equivalent of a polite nod that says, "I hear you, but also my brain has left the chat." This is the beauty and terror of emoji grammar. It's less about dictionary definitions and more about contextual alchemy. You're not just looking at a symbol. You're observing its dance partner, its position in the sentence, and the unspoken history of your relationship with the sender. It's a fascinating phenomenon, really, how these little digital characters have taken on such a dynamic life. Take the simple act of combining them. Individually, the teacup hot and the frog face are just a beverage and an amphibian. Put them together, however, and you instantly recognize the meme. But that's none of my business. It's a statement of detached, slightly judgmental observation, often paired with a sip of imaginary tea. This isn't formal language, yet it possesses a syntax as rigid as any classical Latin. Deviation from the established order, a frog emoji first, then a teacup, and the meaning dissolves, becoming merely a frog admiring a nice cuppa. You find yourself learning these visual idioms not from textbooks, but from the relentless, delightful current of online interaction, an education by cultural osmosis. This emergent grammar extends to emotional amplification and mitigation. A harsh text message, devoid of emojis, can land like a digital punch. "I'm not happy with that." Ouch. But add a slightly sad face, slightly frowning face, or a stressed face, tired face, and suddenly, the tone shifts. It's no longer an accusation, but a shared lament, an expression of personal distress rather than an aggressive confrontation. Conversely, a stream of crying, laughing faces, face, amplifies joy to the point of hysteria, indicating a humor so potent it's practically fatal. This isn't just about adding emotion. It's about fine-tuning the emotional register of your entire message, like a skilled conductor guiding an orchestra of feelings. Historians still argue whether emojis represent a regression to primitive pictographic communication or an evolution into a more universally understood visual lexicon. On one hand, you're back to using images to convey ideas, much like our earliest ancestors scrawling mammoths on cave walls. On the other, the sophistication of their contextual use, their ability to convey nuanced emotion across language barriers, suggests something far more advanced than mere iconic representation. It's not just a picture of a thing. It's a picture about a feeling, a mood, a subtext. Consider the mainstream historical fact that formal systems of communication, from cuneiform onwards, have always sought clarity and standardization. Yet emojis, while standardized in their appearance by Unicode, thrive on their inherent ambiguity and adaptability. They are a constantly shifting target, a linguistic chameleon. A quirky or fringe tidbit in this regard is the infamous peach emoji peach. Originally just a piece of fruit, its resemblance to a derriere quickly cemented its alternative, often suggestive, meaning. This evolution wasn't mandated by any governing body. It emerged organically from user interaction, a testament to the fluid, democratic nature of emoji grammar. It's an inside joke that everyone is in on, even if they pretend not to be. The semiotics of emojis are a rich field. You might send a single eye emoji eyes to indicate I'm watching, or I see you, or even a warning. It's a silent, loaded glance, carrying more weight than 1,000 words. Or consider the skull emoji skull. While it literally represents a human skull in modern digital parlance, it almost universally means I'm dead, as in, I'm dead from laughing so hard, or this is so relatable it killed me. It's hyperbole made literal, a morbid emoji that conveys ultimate amusement. The placement of emojis also matters. They rarely act as standalone sentences in formal communication, but often punctuate or frame a written message. You wouldn't typically start an email with just a single emoji and expect to be understood, unless it's a very specific, well-established inside joke with your recipient. More often, they follow a statement, acting as an emotional modifier, or they might replace a single word to add a touch of levity or emphasis. I'm going to grab a hamburger is perfectly understood, showing how the picture can directly substitute a noun. This creates a kind of visual shorthand, an efficiency that the telegraph, remember its brevity demands, could only dream of. The global spread of emojis, thanks to Unicode's unification efforts, means these grammatical rules are forming across cultures, though with fascinating divergences. The OK hand gesture emoji OK hand, for example, is positive in many Western cultures, but can be highly offensive in others, proving that even in our pixelated common ground, ancient cultural differences persist. It's a reminder that even the most seemingly universal symbols are filtered through the intricate lens of local understanding. You are, in essence, an active participant in the ongoing creation of a new visual vernacular. Every time you consciously choose an emoji to convey sarcasm, empathy, or a perfectly nuanced passive-aggressive barb, you are reinforcing, bending, or even breaking the unspoken rules, shaping the grammar of tomorrow. It's a language learned through immersion, understood through context, and constantly evolving, much like any living language before it. But unlike the slow march of phonetic shifts over centuries, emoji grammar morphs at the speed of light, adapting to new memes, new social currents, and new ways for humanity to communicate without saying a single word. You find yourself adrift on a shimmering sea of pixels, your fingertips dancing across the glass, weaving tailies not just with words, but with tiny, vibrant pictograms. A single tap and a red heart pulsates on screen, or perhaps a determined bicep flexes, or maybe, just maybe, a single tear rolls down a yellow cheek. You're not just typing. You're painting, conducting an orchestra of emotions with miniature digital maestros. This isn't your great-grandparents' telegraph, where every letter cost a fortune and brevity was a religion. No, this is the grand, sprawling canvas of the emoji, and you are its unwitting master, navigating its cultural tides, its waves of meaning, its surprisingly deep currents. Honestly, if you tried to explain the nuance of a face with tears of joy, emoji to someone from, say, 1823, their brain would probably short-circuit, and you might not survive the ensuing existential crisis as they grappled with the sheer absurdity of conveying profound amusement with a single, perfectly round digital face. But for you, it's as natural as breathing, a silent exclamation point, a chuckle, or an eye roll all rolled into one efficient little symbol. The way you express yourself has irrevocably morphed, hasn't it? Gone are the days when a written apology had to be a paragraph of carefully chosen words. Now, a simple sad face, perhaps coupled with a single word like oops, conveys a surprising depth of contrition. Emojis add a layer of paralinguistic communication to text, much like vocal inflections and facial expressions do in spoken language. They allow you to infuse your cold, hard text with warmth, sarcasm, irony, or playful teasing, creating a digital emotional shorthand that makes your messages feel more human, more immediate, and frankly, a lot less likely to be misunderstood as hostile or aloof. Remember how we talked about emojis' new grammar forms. This is where that grammar truly breathes, where it transforms the very rhythm and tone of your digital conversations, turning flat lines of text into vibrant, expressive dialogues. But it's not just your personal chats that have been reshaped. Step into the glittering, often chaotic world of marketing, and you'll witness an even more dramatic transformation. Brands, once rigid and formal in their communication, have embraced the emoji with a fervor that would make a medieval scribe drop their quill. From the sleekest luxury brands to the most down-to-earth fast food chains, emojis have become an indispensable tool in their arsenal. You see them plastered across social media campaigns, nestled in email subject lines, and even integrated into product names. A pizza place isn't just offering a discount. They're offering a pizza party for your taste buds. A coffee shop isn't just open. They're brewing up magic for you, hot sparkles. Why? Because emojis grab your attention. They break through the digital noise with their vibrant colors and immediate visual recognition. They bypass the need for lengthy explanations, conveying a mood, a product, or an offer in a flash. They speak to a younger, digitally native audience in their own visual language, fostering a sense of relatability and fun that traditional advertising often struggles to achieve. It's almost as if brands realize that if you can't beat them, you might as well join them and start speaking in tiny, delightful pictures. The risk, of course, is sounding like your dad trying to be hip with the kids, but most marketing teams are surprisingly adept at threading that needle. The most fascinating, and perhaps most perilous, aspect of the emoji's cultural impact lies in its ambition to transcend language barriers and foster global understanding. In theory, a smiling face means happiness, regardless of whether you speak Mandarin, Swahili, or Icelandic. And to a large extent, this holds true. Emojis have indeed become a kind of universal pictorial Rosetta Stone, allowing people from vastly different linguistic backgrounds to convey basic emotions and concepts with remarkable ease. You can send a thumbs up to someone halfway across the world, and they'll likely understand it as approval or agreement. You can send a crying face, and they'll grasp your sadness. However, the simplicity is often a veneer. This is where the quirky tidbits and the scholarly debates come in. Take the humble thumbs up emoji, for example. While widely accepted as a positive gesture in Western cultures, You send that same emoji to someone in parts of the Middle East, West Africa, or South America, and you might just have inadvertently conveyed a rather rude, offensive gesture. Or consider the clasped hands emoji. Is it a prayer? Is it a thank you? Is it a high five? The interpretation often hinges on cultural context and personal usage. Historians still argue whether the universal adoption of certain emojis truly fosters global understanding, or simply creates a new, subtly nuanced Tower of Babel, where a grinning face in one culture signifies genuine amusement, and in another, passive aggression. It's a fascinating, complex problem born from the very human tendency to imbue symbols with culturally specific meanings. Remember how our ancestors painted pictographs on cave walls, each stroke holding communal significance. Well, we're doing the same thing, but now it's on a screen, and the cave is the entire internet. Another mainstream historical fact to consider. The proliferation of emojis represents a fundamental shift in how digital interaction feels. From the formal, often terse emails of the early internet, we've transitioned to a communication landscape that prioritizes immediacy, informality, and a visual richness that was once exclusive to face-to-face interactions. Emojis, in essence, bring back some of the nonverbal cues that are lost in text-based communication. They allow you to clarify tone, express humor without being misinterpreted as serious, and add warmth to what would otherwise be cold, impersonal characters. This evolution mirrors humanity's long-standing desire for more expressive and nuanced communication. From the intricate hieroglyphs of ancient Egypt, which blended art and language, to the expressive flourishes of medieval illuminated manuscripts. We've always wanted to say more than just words, and emojis are the modern iteration of that ancient yearning. They've even started to influence everyday speech, with people now saying things like, "That's a big eye-roll emoji from me," or "I'm feeling a full-on crying laughing emoji right now." It's a linguistic feedback loop, where the digital influences the verbal, and the verbal influences the digital. The alphabet might have turned into emojis, but emojis are now turning back into a kind of spoken shorthand, too. It's a dizzying dance, isn't it? You close your eyes, but the screen behind your eyelids persists, not as a flat rectangle, but as a swirling vortex of shimmering, morphing symbols. They aren't static images anymore. They breathe, they pulse, they reflect your mood with an almost unnerving accuracy. Imagine a world where your thumbs up doesn't just sit there, frozen in digital amber, but flexes, perhaps even sparkles with a tiny puff of celebratory confetti. This isn't just about making your digital messages look prettier. It's about pushing the boundaries of what communication can feel like. It's a world where a simple blinking eye might convey more nuanced emotion than 1,000 written words. And frankly, your brain, wired for those old Roman letters, might just short-circuit trying to keep up. Good luck explaining that to your grandkids, assuming they still communicate in anything resembling spoken language. That is. The static little pictures we've grown to love, those emoji you use for everything from a quick laugh to a subtle side-eye, are merely the evolutionary stepping stones to something far more dynamic. You're entering the realm of animated emojis, where every nuance is a fleeting performance. Think beyond the simple GIF, which, remember, has been around since the late 80s, a practically ancient history in internet years. We're talking about real-time animations, expressions that adapt to the context of your conversation, perhaps even subtly mimicking your own facial expressions as you type. It's like having a tiny digital mime troupe performing your inner monologue for every recipient. And if you're thinking, but what about the battery drain? Well, That's tomorrow's problem, and probably why your smart contact lenses will need charging every 2 hours. The mainstream historical fact here is that animation, as a concept, predates computers by centuries. From the earliest flipbooks and zoetropes in the 19th century, people have been fascinated by bringing static images to life. The digital age simply provided a new canvas and an unprecedented level of accessibility. Now, every single one of us can be a micro-animator with a flick of a finger. This move towards kinetic communication is also driven by the sheer volume of visual content consumed daily. You're not just reading words anymore. You're scrolling through endless feeds of short videos, reaction clips, and animated memes. Your brain is retraining itself to absorb information in vibrant, moving bursts. It's an evolutionary leap, or perhaps just a very clever way to avoid spelling out difficult words. But the real revolution isn't just in movement, it's in personalization. You recall how those Unicode symbols started to diversify, adding different skin tones and professions. That was just the prologue. Now imagine a world where your digital avatar isn't just a generic face with your hair color, but a truly bespoke creation. An AI-generated doppelganger that perfectly captures your unique expressions, your quirks, your bad hair days. These aren't just Bitmojis anymore. These are you as a digital symbol, able to convey emotions with a specificity that current emojis can only dream of. Your personalized facepalm might not be a generic yellow hand, but a precise replication of your own forehead crinkle, your sigh, your very essence of exasperation. What a time to be alive, or, digitally represented. A quirky tidbit in this futurescape is the exploration of haptic emojis. Imagine not just seeing a heart, but feeling a gentle pulse on your wrist, or a tiny vibration when someone sends a digital hug. Or perhaps something more unsettling, a jarring jolt when a digital eye roll is deployed. Your devices won't just show you emotions, they'll let you feel them, adding another layer to our already multi-sensory digital existence. Historians still argue whether the proliferation of personalized visual symbols ultimately enhanced or diluted the universality of shared human emotion. If my digital avatar is sending you a highly specific, I'm mildly annoyed, but also kind of hungry, expression, are we still connecting on a universally understood level? Or are we just creating more inside jokes only our AI knows? It's a fun thought to ponder, as your future self tries to explain to a robot why you're laughing at a pixelated cat. This personalization extends beyond just your face. Picture a future where the digital symbols you use are dynamically generated to reflect local slang, cultural nuances, or even the inside jokes shared within your immediate social circle. Your tea emoji might transform into a specific local beverage, or your celebrate emoji might include elements of a regional festival. It's an incredible level of specificity, making every communication feel intimately tailored. And yes, it's going to make understanding historical digital conversations incredibly difficult for future anthropologists. They sent a crab emoji, but what kind of crab? And why did it have tiny spectacles? The interpretative challenges will be immense, almost as immense as trying to decipher your grandmother's shorthand notes from the 1950s. The dream of a universal language, which we saw beginning with those Phoenician sounds, twists into a mosaic of hyper-personalized expressions. The trajectory is clear. From simple pictures to abstract marks to standardized letters, and now, spiraling back towards images. But images imbued with unprecedented depth, movement, and individual identity. We're witnessing the full circle from pictographs to hyperpictographs, each new iteration building upon the last, layering meaning and emotion. Remember those earliest cave paintings, how they captured a moment, a hunt, a story. Now imagine those moments animated, brought to life, and personalized to your own unique experience. You are living through the next grand chapter of communication, whether you fully grasp it or not. And just like those ancient scribes painstakingly illuminating manuscripts, we are, in our own digital way, crafting a new visual lexicon, one blinking, pulsing, personalized symbol at a time. The alphabet, as you knew it, is not disappearing. It's simply evolving, shedding its rigid shell to embrace a more fluid, vibrant form. It's a spectacular show, really, even if it does make you feel a little bit like a historical artifact yourself. Now, as the screen dims, and the swirling symbols of tomorrow begin to fade from your mind's eye, allow yourself to drift. The journey through time, from the earliest whispers of pictographs on cave walls to the vibrant, animated echoes of our digital future, has been long. You've seen how humanity, in its endless quest to connect, has constantly reinvented the very fabric of language. From the painstaking chiseling of cuneiform to the swift tap of an emoji, each step was a testament to our innate need to share, to understand, to simply say, I am here, and I feel this. Feel the gentle hum of the world outside, the quiet rhythm of the night. The letters and symbols, the words and pictures, they are all just tools, instruments in the grand symphony of human connection. And as your thoughts soften, remember that at the heart of it all, whether it's a meticulously copied manuscript or a flashing, personalized avatar, lies the simple desire to reach out, to bridge the spaces between us. You have navigated centuries, millennia even, all from the quiet comfort of your own bed. The echoes of ancient whispers and the faint glow of future screens now meld into a single, calming presence. There's no need to decipher tomorrow's language right now. Just let the images gently recede. Your mind, full of history and dreams of what's next, deserves its rest. Let the currents of time carry you softly, deeper and deeper into tranquility. Sweet dreams.